You are Locked On Bulls Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Chicago on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Bulls Postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Joe George here with you on Twitter at JoeGeorge92, Instagram and TikTok at JoeGeorge Radio. The Bulls lose 129-113, but don't let the final score fool you. That was a brutal game for the Chicago Bulls as they lose to the Indiana Pacers and move to 17-20 on the season. Today's episode on the account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So this game was ugly for the most part. Look, in the first 15 minutes of the game, I think it was the first 14 minutes of the game, the Bulls had 2 over 3.5 minute stretches where they didn't score a basket. So obviously they're struggling to score at the very beginning of this game right away. 29-18 is the first quarter score. They got scored 34-26 in the second quarter. But when you start this game and you have 2 stretches in 14 minutes of over 3.5 minutes, that's 6 of 14 minutes in the first 14 minutes of the game, you don't score in. It was abysmal basketball. They couldn't hit anything. They couldn't hit layups. They couldn't hit things from the outside. They couldn't hit mid-range shots. The Bulls were just ice cold in this game. This kind of feels like one of those games that we've talked about before, and Bulls fans have talked about for years now, where like they just come out flat in a way it's so flat. It's really leading to a largely uncompetitive basketball game. Yes, they got it back down to 14 there in the fourth quarter with about 7 minutes left to go. But the Bulls got down at one point in this game by 34 points. So even getting it down to 14 kind of just feels like the Pacers were taking their foot off the gas, not really playing the same basketball game they were early on. And a team without Miles Turner tonight really just kind of had their way with you. I mean, Pascal Siakam was really good in this game, and the Bulls were okay in certain aspects in terms of like the second half of the game. But the first half of the game, besides just the lack of scoring, they gave a 15-0 run to make it 36-18, so they were down by 18 points, had only scored 18. You have the moment of the game, which is probably the worst moment of the game, in which Lonzo Ball forces a missed layup. He turns around and sees nobody. There is 4 other guys on his team, and there is nobody near him at all. And look, Indiana was all over the Bulls. Like, they were playing great defense, so I think there is some credit to be given to the Pacers tonight, as was kind of talked about at the end of the broadcast. If you're listening, if you suffered through it, the Pacers, like, they had a really bad start to the season. Their win against the Bulls earlier this year really kind of turned things around. So the record is not really representative of who they are as a basketball team. But yeah, it was tough. Evening, Joe. Man, that was a tough watch. Yes, man, it was a tough watch. It was not good basketball tonight. Total turnovers, 18 turnovers on the night. Stunning number, honestly, that it's that low. They had 13 in the first and second quarter, 13 turnovers in the first half. That's brutal basketball. To have 7 turnovers in the first quarter alone, it's just not winning basketball. And to have that performance, what's obviously the most frustrating is, like, this is why the Bulls season is so strange so far. You have those 2 games, the Hornets and the Wizards game, where you're not good. Yes, you beat the Hornets, but you had to, go to overtime to win that game. You're terrible against the Wizards. Derrick Rose night, you have a great second half against the Knicks. You have your 4th 18-plus point comeback against the San Antonio Spurs the other night. And then you come out and have this performance, and it just shows this roller coaster that we are on watching the Chicago Bulls this year, where they can have competitive, good nights. They can shoot the ball really well. And then you can have performances like this, where you have 13 turnovers in the first half. They shot 34% from the three-point line, which is also, shows you like they did play much better in the second half. They shot 23.7% from the three-point line in the first half. They had 14 turnovers in the first half. So they really put themselves in a position to where this was a total no-win situation, where you're not going to get valuable minutes from your guys. I totally agree with the chat here. Bad body language for everyone besides Lonzo Ball, which we'll talk about Lonzo in the next segment. Really, he was the only guy tonight. A couple things that frustrate me with a game like this. I don't quite understand how you're having this level of performance, and we're not just letting like Modest Buzelis just go out there and try. Like, just try to just see what you got. Like just continue to give the kid more minutes. I know that's why he's been going a little bit up and down from the G League roster to the NBA roster. But if you're having a game like this where you're really just having no prayer against the Pacers, just let him go out there and play 35 minutes. Take your starters out. There's no point. Yes, the stat lines look good in the end. Zach LaVine, another 30-point game. I think that's 4 straight now for him. Kobe White ends up with 19 points. Vooch had a really tough night, 10 points. I mean, early on they were showing it where I think it was like pretty early on in the second quarter where the Bulls were a minus 17 as a team with Lonzo Ball off the court and a plus 4 with him on it. So, like I said, we'll talk about Lonzo and the impact he continues to make on this team as really the bright spot. But it's just like, why not let the young kids play? I mean, look, it is January 8th, and you're playing a regular season basketball game in which the last 5 minutes of conversation between Stacey King and Adam Amin are talking about Michael Jordan versus the Houston Rockets. And if they would have played in the 2 years that Michael Jordan, the 1 year that Jordan wasn't in the league, and the 1 year where obviously he came back and they got knocked out of the playoffs, that's where we're at with this game tonight. Like, they're not having a conversation about the game because you can tell listening to it, Stacey King and Adam Amin are just... It was more Stacey is just furious of what he's watching. It was just really, really ugly, bad basketball from this team. And it's a lack of effort. It's a lack of just being like starting fast in this game. Like, you're not even seeing some of the weird, not weird because they're just typical at this point where like Billy Donovan's calling timeouts early in the quarter. But early on in the first or second quarter, Josh Giddey gets a turnover because he doesn't set his feet out of bounds. Now, they don't call that all the time. And frankly, like, it's something that happens all the time in the NBA, but the Bulls have a couple of those this year where it's like they're easy to remember because they happen so frequently or so infrequently in the NBA where someone's not set. But like things like that, they were super careless with the way that they played this game. And I think we continue to learn about, we know like these games happen. I think we'll learn a lot about the Bulls, honestly, in their next game versus the Wizards. Just like what kind of performance you're going to have after a night like this. And like as we wait for the trade deadline to get here, it's just these are the things that are going to happen. And that's what we're going to talk about in the third segment, because this thing that happened tonight for the bigger picture of the Bulls organization is what needs to stop the most. To have these level of performances, it's just they're totally, like, I hate to use the word like unacceptable, but like, because like I'm not on the team, I'm not like a member of the front office. Obviously, we're just here on YouTube and on audio, just like talking Bulls basketball. But like as a fan, it's infuriating to watch the team that we love and root for to just have performances like this after being down by 19 points to the Spurs and coming out and finishing it. I mean, when we're celebrating, getting it down from 34 to 14 with 7 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter and trying to pretend like there's going to be some big comeback, just kind of shows you where Bulls basketball is at this year. They're a 17-20 team, and half the games are going to be like half the games are going to be like this. It feels like half the games are going to be good. Half the games are going to be absolutely terrible. Whatever. It's fascinating. The Bulls don't have much in between. Maybe some of these games have an in between, like these games where they're getting down by 17, 18, 19 points, and then coming back and getting these big fun victories. But they are not really like a middle ground team. The record says they are, but the performances either really feel like they're really disastrous or really good, and the tone of them is just very. It's fascinating to watch because I've never seen a basketball team I feel like be this up and down, but still sticking around 500 as it is. Like, this isn't a young basketball team anymore that has some young pieces, but like really it's a veteran basketball team that comes out and has 14 turnovers in the first half. Cool, you had 4 in the second half, but how do you have 14 in the first half? Like how do you play that careless of basketball in a game? I don't quite understand. So we'll talk about the only positive I'll take from tonight. I don't really care about Zach LaVine's 30 points. I feel like a lot of it's empty. It's good for the stat line. It's good for the All-Star ballot. It's good for, if a GM is looking at box scores and not watching actual tape and thinking about trading for him, that he got a 31-point game. Like, that stuff's good. But Lonzo Ball continues to be, I think, the biggest bright spot of the Bulls. So we'll talk about his performance again tonight because he really felt like a lone man out there for the Bulls. So we'll get into the next year on the Locked On Bulls postcast on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I'm really excited about, Ultimate College Basketball HC. If you ever dreamed of being a college basketball head coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In Ultimate Basketball HC, you control every detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, and managing scholarship. It's all in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to drop offensive plays and set your strategy. The way that you won't just affect the current season, it will shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer for Locked On NBA listeners. Use promo code LOCKEDONCB, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download the Ultimate College Basketball HC, to visit ultimate-cbb.com or look it up in all of the app stores. Ultimate College Basketball HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Might have to do that. So when watching some of these Bulls games, I take pretty detailed notes when I go through these games. I try to. This is what I got here for the Bulls today before we talk about Lonzo. Brutal start to this game offensively. Indiana is all over them. Levine gets 2 buckets in a row. A great blitz by Lonzo that forces a turnover. Zach LaVine misses the layup, but Vooch gets the offensive board. Gets back to 17-14 for the Pacers. The Pacers go on an 8-0 run, 29-18 lead at the end of the first quarter. They have 7 turnovers. Pacers make it 15-0 to make it 36-18. 2 3+ minutes scoreless of basketball in 14 minutes. Lonzo forces the layup, as we just talked about. Turns around, there's nobody there for him. The Bulls are down 63-44 at halftime. And then my next notes are Bulls get it back to 14 with 7 minutes left. And then, we are doing Houston versus Jordan talk at the end of the game. Those are all the notes I took for tonight's game because it was ugly. It got out of hand. But in this game, again, Lonzo Ball continues to be the one piece of this team that I think on a night in and night out basis is the most consistent. Now, I think Zach LaVine has had a really good year for the Bulls. And like I said, 31 points, a lot of it's empty minutes, empty points in this game, whatever, doesn't really matter to me. But he's had a really good season for the Bulls. Obviously, Nikola Vucevic has had a great year. He looks like he's going to be an all-star. Tough night tonight versus the Pacers. But Lonzo Ball, specifically, once he got back from his illness and the jump shot started to look a little bit better, the pace in which he plays with continues to be the best thing, the best version of the Bulls. And as we said, in the second quarter, early on, the Bulls are a -17 in plus-minus. So they're down by 17 points when he's not on the court. They're up by 4 points. They're a +4 when he's out there. They just play a different style of basketball. So I, again, will say, I don't know how it works. I don't know what it looks like. But I would like to see, because of games like this specifically, I would like to see Lonzo Ball start for the Chicago Bulls. Because the way that he plays, the pace that he plays, I just feel like if he's out there on the court with this team when tip-off happens, it's going to be much harder for the Bulls to have these lackadaisical and just terrible starts to the game because at least they'll be playing with a much higher effort level and a much better overall basketball game when he's out there. So that's all I'm asking for. It's just like, let me see it. Like, this is our new thing. For a while, it was play Jalen Smith and Nikola Vucevic together. That one's over. That's past. That's never happening. Maybe this one will never happen either. Maybe we'll have to wait till the trade deadline until guys like Zach LaVine are gone. But even I will be back at some point this season, of course. But give me Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball in the starting lineup. It's nothing against Josh Giddey. But like, I'm kind of ready for it looked to be better at the beginning of these games. Even these games they're winning, like the Spurs game is the perfect example. The fact that the Bulls have 4 games this year, which they've done 18 points or more, and they've had to come back and win these games, and that's an impressive accomplishment in itself. You still got down 18, and now Lonzo's part of these games, right? But it's just better overall when he's on the court, and the stop layup where there's no one around him, that transition there where I think it was Jarris Walker might have been in the corner, where he moves off his guy, he forces the turnover, they get it back down to 17-14. Like in that moment, it's like, all right, the Bulls are going to figure this out. Obviously, they didn't, but it was Lonzo's defense. He had another moment where he read the eyes of whoever was on offense for the Pacers, intercepted it like a cornerback. Just continues to have elite level defensive plays. And Stacey King said on the broadcast, he's their best defensive player right now. So even if you're not getting the most offensive production out of Lonzo, and yes, I'm aware if you put him in the starting lineup, there will be numbers of whoever you take out, which we had a question about here in the chat we'll get to in a second. But if you're going to put him in the lineup like that, you might lose some offense. So who would you bench? Who would you bench? Josh Giddey or Kobe White? That's the tough part. Well, the first time I had this conversation, I said Kobe White. Kobe White talked me out of it. The way he's played basketball recently, more attacking to the rim. The three-point shot is looking a little bit better. Obviously not his best game tonight versus the Pacers either. I think it's Giddey. I know you traded for this guy, but if you're not going to close with him, why do you have to start him? Like, if you're not going to put him out there in the final 4 minutes of the game, why does he have to be out there for the first 6.5 minutes of the game? To me, there's no difference. Like, if the relationship or whatever that forced him to leave Oklahoma City because of playing time is a matter of concern to you, well, then you don't want a guy like that on the team. Like, if you have to put Lonzo into the starting lineup and take Josh Giddey out of it, so you stop having these embarrassing performances to start a game and digging yourselves into holes that you're not going to get out of. If he doesn't want to be part of that, then he doesn't want to be part of it. Like, I don't care. Like, we're not here for feelings. We're here for getting out of the gutter of being Bulls basketball and trying to find something more positive to think about. So if Josh Giddey doesn't want to be part of that, then oh well. Then like let him walk in free agency. But that's who I would go with right now, just because, and it's really nothing against Josh Giddey. It's the positivity that Lonzo brings to this team that's so clear on a night in and night out basis, whether you're winning or losing, and that's what matters most. Because he's really the only guy in tonight's game, at least in the first half, where it didn't matter that they were down by a ton of points, that they had 2 stretches of 3.5 minutes where they didn't score, that they were not getting anything to go in the bucket because the Pacers were playing overall great defense against you. He doesn't care. Like, he just plays basketball. And maybe that's because he was out for so long, but if he can do it, so can everyone else. So it's just something I'd like to see. And I know it's complicated with the minutes restrictions and everything, but they seem to be letting that, ramp up as well. And, the way he's been, he's dunked the basketball twice in the 2 games before this, 2 of the last 3 games before this. He looks healthy. And I know you don't want to push it to a point where you're going to regret it, but if Lonzo's wanting to push it, if Lonzo's willing to say, hey, I'm ready for more minutes, then let it ramp up a little bit. So just because you can't keep having these starts. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment, because this is really the Achilles heel of the Bulls season. It's the reason why they're a below 500 basketball team. It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of, Zach LaVine scoring enough or Vooch playing well enough. The reason why the Bulls are a below 500 basketball team is because of nights like this. And it's the biggest thing that with this team, they have to find a way to stop, whether it's now, after the trade deadline, and there's a bunch of ways to solve it, and we're going to try to talk about it next, because I got nothing left to talk about with this Bulls-Pacers game, besides the fact that it was bad. So we're going to talk about the game in a big picture perspective next year on the Locked On Bulls postcast here on the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. Also took my son to his first basketball game, professional basketball game, about 2 weeks ago. Incredible time. Use Gametime to do it. The energy and excitement are always unforgettable at these big events. Now, Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now look, from Chicago, Bulls fan, clearly doing this show. I live in Houston, Texas currently. One of my favorite things about Gametime, driving into work today, got an alert from Gametime that Texans Chargers tickets, 49% drop off from the last 7 days, because no one wants to go to that football game. I was like, maybe we'll take a look at these prices from Gametime. So I love that they send those alerts when prices are dropping for games as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, so besides your roster construction, I think the number one thing the Bulls have to solve, that's been a problem recently, the last couple years, is like these performances. Now, this isn't the worst of it, I would say, because I still feel like the Wizards game, honestly, is way worse than what happened tonight. So lose to a team like the Wizards like they did a couple nights ago, have that level of performance against a team that got their 6th win of the season, your first game of 2025, embarrassing. Like one of the worst things we'll see all year. But this game, where you're playing a team that's good, and typically the Bulls get up for these games. Like we saw the Knicks game, the Spurs game, these things happen. But there are just too often where I feel like the Bulls come out really flat. And to a point where they put themselves in a hole, down 34 points in this game at one point. It's impossible to win those games. They clearly can win if they're down by 18, 19, or 20 points. They've done that 4 times this year. You're not going to win basketball games when you get down 34 points, when you're having 14 turnovers in the first half. And that's why we just had that conversation about, like, I want to see Lonzo start because I just think he, removes some of those issues that have been happening. So this is the biggest thing for me that, like, as the Bulls move forward as an organization, whether it's with all of these guys, with some of them, without most of them, if it is Vooch and Levine and Lonzo that are traded, like if they're all moved at the deadline and they're all in different cities, this stuff needs to stop. Like the lack of effort and lack of care, I think, is the bigger issue with the basketball itself. The amount of turnovers you had, that's the thing the Bulls need to find a way to, like, look in the mirror, shake themselves out of. You're just not going to win basketball games this way. And it just built a terrible, terrible culture. And it's part of the reason why I feel like these are still happening. It's because they've been happening for 3 years now, it feels like, where they're awful at the start of games. I mean, Billy Donovan, how many times this year has he called those timeouts, a minute into a quarter? It's crazy. Like when you give up an open shot, a wide open shot, and then they're giving a wide open offensive rebound for a layup. Those things that should be almost an impossible sentence to have someone open from the 3-point line, brick it, and then have someone open for the offensive rebound and then be able to put it back in without anything being contested. That's why Billy Donovan has to call so many of those timeouts. Also, a lot of defensive lapses where there's just terrible communication. They're just clearly not talking to each other, and guys get lost and easy buckets get put up. So, like, how do you stop this? I've mentioned this before too, and I know, the Locked On Bulls YouTube channel, they had a show about, does Billy Donovan, make it, into next season? If the games like this are going to happen, it's got to fall on somebody. Someone's got to fall on the sword. So whether it's, you make these trades and it doesn't change, and you got to look at the coach. If you make these trades and it changes, well, then maybe it was the guys who were on this team. A lot can happen, I think, the rest of the year, and what we can learn about the Bulls once we get past February 6th or whatever the deadline is this year. But until you get there, they just got to find a way to just get their heads out of their butts and just play better basketball and play in a way in which you're not going to be so reckless, and just giving turnovers and, make little things, like the little details. That's what is, I think, part of this conversation too, is there are just little details that they're so bad at. And that's how these games really kind of devolve into something that's really just awful to watch, frankly. They were talking about on the broadcast tonight. Adam Amin and Stacey King were early on in the first half of just, it's these little things that are happening. The rotating well. They did a little one of Stacey King's little moments with his telestrator where they're running the 2-3 zone and Kobe is just totally out of position. And I talked about this the first time they ran it. Maybe it was the second time they ran a zone this year. They got no idea what they're doing. They don't know the rules. They don't know how to follow it. They don't know where they're supposed to be. It's almost like every time they run a 2-3 zone, it's like they've never practiced it. But occasionally they just throw it out there in games like this, hoping it's going to cause chaos. But it usually just makes things worse, honestly, when they try to do it. So there's just a real lack of attention to detail and care for the basketball. And the other one, too, that is part of this that I think we really saw in tonight's game, which has been a problem for the Bulls that honestly I think most of this season they've done a much better job of this year. And I think it's because of Zach LaVine specifically. The bad body language after missed shots that leads to really bad defense. That was really evident in this game where they're struggling so much offensively that they're really letting it, just be a straight line to bad defense, which is just something that doesn't have to happen. And that's what I think, again, what Lonzo Ball brings to the table is that even as his jump shot has struggled and hasn't been super efficient and hasn't been obviously having games where I couldn't even tell you the last time he scored more than 10 points in a game, but he's still such a positive force when you think back to the Spurs game. The Spurs are coming back, and then all of a sudden, you're battling with the Spurs. Lonzo comes in, the Spurs don't score the rest of the game. Those are the kind of things. So they got to figure out how to stop being so sloppy with the basketball, how to start better in these games, and just not be such poor performances so early on where you're putting yourselves in these giant holes. And again, like not just Modest playing him more, like if you're getting blown out, like just to let the young kid go. It's also interesting to me, like where Billy Donovan has that small ball lineup that he uses occasionally, where like with like Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips and Lonzo and Jalen Smith and usually I can't remember who the other person is. Maybe it's, I guess, Modest. I didn't say him. Where like they're brought in for energy, and that's the only reason. They're only brought in because yes, there's way less talent on the court, but those guys typically, no matter what's happening, play with a high level of energy. Didn't even feel like we saw that strategy happen in this game. So this was a tough one. The Bulls lose 129 to 113 to the Indiana Pacers. They moved to 17-20 on the season, while the Pacers moved to 20-18. So long way to go till the deadline. Hopefully the next Bulls game will be more reminiscent of what we saw in the second half of the Knicks and Spurs game when they take on, I believe it is, the Washington Wizards. So need a bounce back performance against them. Don't let them get their 7th win of the season unless they magically won one between the last time they played you. I'm just going to bet against it. Without looking at the standings. So try not to lose to the Wizards in the next game, and we'll be here for you. Win or lose, we're always here for you for every single Bulls, Bears, Notre Dame, and eventually Cubs game. Well, it's almost eventually Bears is really. The Bears are farther away than the Cubs now at this point. But we're always here. So hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on audio, come on over. We're live. As you heard today, we'll read your comments. Whatever you guys got, your venting, your frustration, your positives, your negatives, whatever you got, we'll talk about live on these YouTube shows. We're going to make them as humanly interactive as possible. Reminder, the Locked On Sports Chicago YouTube channel will be live tomorrow night on Thursday night, or maybe it's tonight if you're listening on audio, as soon as Penn State and Notre Dame wraps up. And then, of course, like I said, we're here after every single Chicago Bulls game, win or lose, ugly or beautiful, we're here for you. So hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. As always, we will talk to you next time. Peace.